Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing good. I am in Rome, and in Rome is a little bit chilly, a little bit cold, but as I was saying, Natalie, I'm enjoying this cold weather, waiting for the heat and for the warm weather at the summer times. Top highlights of Rome. Before starting with that, a little bit about myself. Yes, you pronounced it right, Natalie. Thank you. It's Dimo Kosmopoulos, strong Greek name because my father was Greek. My long name should be Dimosthenis, but we go with Dimo, easier. My mom is from Rome. I grew up here, but being the first boy of my dad, I got the strong Greek name. I studied in Rome, in the University of Rome, and I am an archaeologist. So it's a good place, let's say, to be an archaeologist, Rome. And what is most important of all, I love to share my passion with you because you're here with me. And of course, passion on everything, especially archaeology, art history, and just curiosity. This is my keyword, as always. So I'm not important today, Rome is. So let's forget about myself and let's go with the top highlights of Rome. Well, I have to say that top, I have to put in quotation marks because it's not easy. We have only 30 minutes together, so it was challenging to choose something. Rome has a huge history. We're talking about more than 2,700 years of history, and to choose some top highlights is very challenging and very difficult. But this said, I'll try to give you something. I will say my goal will be today to give you a little bit of a taste of what Rome is and to a little bit bring up some curiosity, and that's always good, of course. So that's why, with the beautiful view of the Colosseum here, we're going to go through a little introduction. And then when I was, let's say, planning and building up this conversation, I said, how many highlights? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I said, ad libitum. So I took something from the music world. So I would say, at once, pleasure highlights. I cannot count them. My mom always say, Rome, you need a lifetime to understand Rome. And that's true, of course. There's so much. So I will try to give you a little bit my view of the city and some tips, I will call them. Introduction. So let's warm up a little bit with a beautiful view of the Pantheon, of course. We're going to talk about it. So the way I approach Rome is, first of all, thinking about the timeline. We always have to keep in mind the long timeline that Rome has. That means we said more than 2,700 years of history. But if you divide the history of Rome in 3 big time blocks, you'll be able to put everything in the right position. Ancient Rome, the medieval times, and modern Rome. As an archaeologist, I focus on ancient Rome. So for instance, in my field, I will go more in depth by dividing ancient Rome timeline into the 7 kings of Rome times, the Roman Republic with the consuls and the House of the Senate ruling, and the Roman Empire. This is just a little example because today you're listening to me. If you listen to another colleagues or experts, they will really tell you, well, I will divide the medieval times, the modern Rome. There's so much to choose and to pick. That's what makes Rome one of my favorite cities, because you have so much that you can really, really dive into. So there you go. So timeline, that also means layers, layers of time, layers of dirt. That's what we dig as archaeologists, layers of architecture, layers of art, layers of artifacts, layers of history. That's the beauty of Rome. Underneath our feet, we have billions of layers, of course, and we can choose and we can pick. So that's why Rome is always worth it to come back and see something more or go more in depth in some layers. So if you have this in mind, how the city is built on layers, you understand, of course, how to approach it, and that it will be endless. It will never finish. Today is 19th of April. The day after tomorrow, the 21st, it will be the birthday of Rome. We will celebrate our Christmas, we call it. So that's why now we are reaching the 2,776 years old birthday. It will be the day after tomorrow. So there we go. So in 2 days, happy birthday, Rome. Of course, I'm an archaeologist, so I cannot, a must-see is the Archaeological Park. I cannot skip this, the Parco Archeologico del Colosseo. The Archaeological Park of the Colosseum, I was born in Rome, I grew up here, so I visited the park as a child during the school trips, then as a teenager, then as a student, now as a scholar, because I also collaborate sometimes with the park. So it's always, and you said, oh, you know it very good. I say, no, I know a little bit of the park, but there's so much to know, as we said, that I will never end learning. So that's really what makes this city to me special. The archaeological park is made of different parts. For sure the Colosseum, we know the building, and the Palatine Hill and the Roman Forum. So in the green line, that's all the huge archaeological park. It's the same ticket. You can come and visit, and as we understand, you need a lot of time. Just you can come here, has a nice stroll in the park. So Colosseum, Palatine Hill, and Roman Forum, the archaeological park. From the sky, let's say, the Colosseum on the left, the Palatine Hill, and the Roman Forum. The Colosseum, one of the main buildings of spectacles of ancient Rome. The Palatine Hill, one of the 7 hills of Rome, and among the 7, one of the most important hills of Rome, and the Roman Forum. That means the main square, the beating heart of ancient Rome. In green is more or less the archaeological park. If you know Rome, red here on the right, that it's Piazza Venezia, or the Capitoline Hill. So the archaeological park is really in between the Colosseum and Piazza Venezia. The Colosseum. So we can now sit down and forget the 30 minutes and just talk about the Colosseum. But no, I cannot do that today. But of course, it's one of my favorite buildings in Rome. It's the main building of spectacles in Rome, maybe after the Circus Maximus, that is bigger. But the Colosseum is an amphitheater, and it's a great ruin today. I always say we're visiting the ruin of the Colosseum, but it's one of the great flowers of architecture. First of all, keep in mind that the name Colosseum is medieval times. So when this was built, it was known as the amphitheater. That means the double theater. Colosseum name comes later, so in ancient Rome was known as the amphitheater, and it's the biggest of the whole Roman Empire, built under the Flavian dynasty. So the Flavian dynasty that started the construction in 72 AD, inaugurated the building in the year 80 AD, and probably completed in 85 and 90 AD. So that means it took 8/10-12 years to build the Colosseum. That's pretty fast, right? If you think that today to build the subway takes 15 years, it's pretty fast, but of course, different times. Well, it's the biggest amphitheater in the whole Roman Empire that could host up to 75,000 people. And this is a flower of architecture, but it's also a very strong political statement of the Flavian dynasty. That's what I love of the Colosseum, not only the architecture of the building, but also the history behind it. Vespasian, Vespasianus, the Flavian starts the construction. Tito continues it, inaugurates the building, and Domitian, the second of the 2 sons of Vespasian, will complete the building. That's why all the Flavian dynasty is involved. The Flavians means the blonde hair. The second most important dynasty in Rome, or not most important, but the second in general, after the Julio-Claudian. So we are in the 70s of the 1st AD. And they come after a civil war. And so you do understand how they use architecture to establish their power. That's why the Colosseum is built so fast, because of course they wanted to say, now we are the new emperors and we are the new dynasty, even though we come from not a noble family, but we use architecture that is the power, language of power, to show off, of course, but also to do a political statement. The Flavian dynasty. Curiosity, the Colosseum on the 80 AD coin that was mint, of course, to celebrate the construction of the building. A little advertisement of the Flavian dynasty. And then you will continue after the Colosseum because you're still hungry, and you'll continue to go up the Palatine Hill, the Palatinus. Among the 7 hills, one of the most important because, well, everything starts on the Palatine Hill. You can imagine how happy were the archaeologists when they went up the hill in the late 1800s. They found traces of a hut village dating back at the 8th/7th century BC, the first Rome. So an empire of 80-90 million of inhabitants stretching from what is today Spain to North England to Near East to North Africa starts from the Palatine Hill, just like as a hut village. It makes sense. And on the slopes of the Palatine Hill, this is the huge empire of Rome. A little bit later, I will say 117 AD. So let's say it took centuries to reach the maximum extension of the empire, but it all started on the Palatine Hill. And that's why, according to the myth, on the slopes of the Palatine Hill, a she-wolf the she-wolf found the two twins, Romulus and Remus. And one of the two, Romulus to be precise, went on top of the Palatine Hill and founded the first city of Rome, the squared Rome. This is the myth. There are 130 versions of a young baby fed by an animal in all the ancient civilizations, of course. But if you believe or not, the Palatine Hill is for sure a very important hill, and it's inside the Archaeological Park. The beautiful she-wolf in the Capitoli museums, we're going to talk about it. And then you will go down the Palatine Hill and reach the Roman Forum area, a huge archaeological area with 1,200 years of history. It's a bunch of ruins, I can say that being an archaeologist, but every little stone will have a story. There's so much history in this area. It's the beating heart of ancient Rome. Forum, square, the main square, temples, basilicas used as courthouses, the house of the Senate, triumphal arches, the main square, all is concentrated in this part of the ancient city. Put here all the historical figures that you know of ancient Rome, from Cornelia, the mother of the Gracchi, Scipio, Cicero, Livia, Agrippina, Nero, Augustus. Everybody walked on this area on different levels, right? But they all walked here. So that makes the Forum also one of my favorite places, because I will never know everything about the Forum. There's so much to know. This square follows all ancient Roman history, from the Seven Kings through the Republic to the Empire and beyond. But then you will finish the Archaeological Park, you'll say, I still want more. So you're going to exit the park and you will walk on the Via dei Fori Imperiali, the Imperial Fora. And here you'll walk on this red road, always in between the Colosseum and Piazza Venezia, and you will have on your left and right-hand side more ruins. A city of 1 million of inhabitants back then, needs more squares. Not only one square, not only one forum, but 2, 3, 4, 5 more fora, more squares. The forum of Julius Caesar, of Vespasian, of Augustus, of Trajan. So other emperors or generals built more. It's the area you see when you walk from the Colosseum to Piazza Venezia without entering the Archaeological Park. And among all the squares, the square of Augustus. Augustus, the adopted son of Julius Caesar, Gaius Iulius Caesar Octavianus Augustus. This was his whole long name. The first emperor of Rome, the one that transformed a republic into an empire, able to transform, not all by himself, but thanks to his entourage, to his group, and in a very subtle and clever way, of course, a republic into one single ruler system, what we call the Roman Empire. Well, Augustus also uses architecture. I found a city made of bricks and I left it made of marble. So he did understand the power of architecture. And all this is explained and displayed in his forum, the Forum of Augustus, built and inaugurated in the year 2 before Christ, so 25 years ago. It's a flower also of the political idea of Augustus. The Temple of Mars dominates the square, Paris, father would say, and with the beautiful capitals and the new acanthus leaves. Here, Augustus and his architects are creating a new language of architecture, that is the Roman imperial language of architecture. So where architecture becomes communication. So of course, you're going to walk in this area and enjoy the beautiful ruins and understand the importance of using architecture to build an empire. And then you will continue visiting the Museo dei Fori Imperiali, the Museum of the Imperial Fora, because we're talking about ruins, empty spaces, but these temples, these porticos, these basilicas, they were not empty. They had things inside, they had movable artifacts, they had furnitures. And that's why you need to go into the museums to put together the ruins with what they had. Of course, with what remains, what we find, or not 100%, but you will enjoy this beautiful head of Zeus Ammon. You can see the curly hair, the beard, the parted lips these eyebrows that really create this movement of this beautiful sculpture of the end of the 1st century before Christ. And on the other side, you see the Corinthian capital of the days of Augustus. So here we can see, once again, a great example of how Augustus is using architecture. Beautiful. Keep in mind that the museums in Rome means the containers are masterpieces themselves. So, for instance, the Museo dei Fori Imperiali, it's housed inside Trajan's market. It's a market that was built, so-called market, that was built in the days of Trajan. We are in the early 2nd century AD. And then you will find medieval buildings on top. Look at that medieval tower in the background, leaning a little bit, 12th century, 1200s, so 13th century AD. This is the beauty of the museums of Rome. Not only the artifacts displayed, but also the containers are artworks. So that's why I strongly recommend also to go in this museum, Museo dei Fori Imperiali. But then you will leave the Seven Hills area and you will walk heading to the Field of Mars, maybe after a coffee. After all this, a little break will be good. And the Field of Mars, you're going to walk north of Rome. So the Archaeological Park is here, Seven Hills, and is in the Seven Hill area of Rome. Walking north, you will reach the Mars Field, the Field of Mars. It was an empty field, like a lowland that was used by the soldiers to train in ancient Rome. That's why it was dedicated to the god of war, Mars. Today, a lot of roads, buildings, shops, restaurants, of course, but back then it was used always by Augustus to build his own power. So back then it was a lowland, a flat land, all empty, and here is where they were all empty, and here's where Augustus builds his tomb, his sundial, and in front the Pantheon. Not with the dome, but a first Pantheon that was already built by Augustus. So this was the idea of the Mars Field in the days of Augustus, with a sundial and with his tomb there in the background. Well, I'm saying all this because, of course, you can still today walk in this part of Rome, enjoy the shops and all the rest, but you will see that some elements will pop out and be part of the ancient Rome of Augustus. The Arapacis, the altar of peace, you can still visit in a museum, and the sundial with an obelisk that still survives today in Rome. All this belongs to the dynastic project built by Augustus. The Mausoleum, still today under restoration, is a building site lined up right in front of the Pantheon. You will understand better all of this by visiting the Arapacis Museum, that is a little bit off the beaten track. It's not always so crowded, but it's a beautiful place to understand the imperial Rome of Augustus. The Pantheon. The Pantheon is my favorite building in Rome. So it's one of the super must-sees in Rome. You must go to the Pantheon. It's an ancient temple built in the days of Hadrian that really today is a church. The transformation into a church preserved the temple. Pantheon in Greek means for all the gods. So it was the main temple for all the gods. It's my favorite building for two reasons. One, it's a great example of architecture. And two, it's so well preserved, because being transformed into a church that preserved the temple. You can fit inside the Pantheon, that is 1800 years old, by the way, a perfect sphere, 43 meters of diameter. So that's incredible. The Pantheon and the use of marble and of stones and of granite in the Pantheon is incredible. Gray granite columns up 12 meters high, 60 tons of weight, and one single piece of granite. There are monoliths. Imagine to quarry them in Egypt and ship them all across the Mediterranean Sea. That's really incredible. And what in the inside, what we can say about the inside, you will step and you will walk on the same floor of the Emperor Hadrian, the emperor with the beard. So you'll walk on porphyry stone, on ancient yellow marble, on Pavonazzetto marble. All the floor is still original since the 2nd century AD, with some restorations, but of course, most of it is original. And the Musei Capitolini, the museums of Rome, let's say the day after, because now you'll be a little bit tired after all this. So you're going to wake up in the morning, have your coffee or cappuccino, and then you will step inside the museums of Rome. Before doing that, you will enjoy the beautiful Piazza del Campidoglio, the Capitoline Hill Square. That is also, by the way, the seat of our mayor, the city administration. They're in the background. On the sides, the two museums. The museums, and by the way, look at this oldish photograph from the top, beautiful, that shows you the square of the Capitoline Hill with this beautiful geometrical pattern that was designed by Michelangelo. You'll step inside the museums and you will enjoy the incredible collection of sculptures and mosaics and bronze statues and all the, let's say, the beauty of ancient Rome. For instance, I picked this satyr made of ancient red marble that comes from Hadrian's villa, the Villa of Hadrian. The red marble here recalls the red wine. He's a satyr. He's a member of the group of Dionysus, right? And also a centaur here made of this gray marble. Beautiful naturalism, strong movement. Look at the anatomy work of the body. 2nd century AD. Imagine walking with Hadrian in his villa and discussing about wine in front of this great masterpiece. In these museums, you also find the statue of my favorite emperor, Marcus Aurelius, one of the only statues made of bronze of an emperor that survives from the ancient times. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher. He dies 180 AD with his beard, just like a Greek philosopher. It's a great, great masterpiece of bronze sculpture. Not easy to find bronze, of course. And then still in the morning, you're going to walk very close to, very next to the Capitoline Museums. You will cross the river and you'll reach Trastevere and the Gianicolo Hill. Trastevere is an open air museum. Narrow streets, cobblestone streets, very churches, medieval atmosphere, 1800 characteristic Rome. Trastevere. The Vatican up there in yellow, and down there Trastevere. Transtiberim on the other side of the river. That's the meaning of Trastevere. So you're going to enjoy walking, and then at one point you will go up the hill and meet the Fontanone, the big fountain of Rome, built in the 1600s. It was built by a Pope, Paul V, Pope Borghese, that also recycled a lot of ancient stones from the Colosseum, from the other buildings of ancient Rome, and repurposes the marble and the stones to build his own big fountain. When you look at the fountain, don't forget to turn around and, of course, enjoy the beautiful panorama of Rome. It's a beautiful place, and to see Rome from the top, from the heights. So you will distinguish the different domes, you will try to spot the Spanish Steps down there, you will just enjoy this beautiful view on the Gianicolo Hill in front of the big fountain. Then you will go down the hill, go back in Trastevere, because the hill of the Gianicolo is on top of Trastevere, and then you will get lost for sure, but then that's the best way to understand and, of course, to visit a city, but then you will end up in the square magically, Piazza San Benedetto in Piscinula, and you will see this church and you will say, it's not worth it because that bell tower is so small. And yes, it is. By the way, it's the smallest bell tower in Rome, but this facade of the church is so simple. Well, enter inside the church because, of course, the interior is beautiful. One of the best preserved medieval floors that you will find in Rome dates back at the 11th/12th century AD, and it's known as the Cosmatesco. The Cosmati family in the medieval times were very famous because they were great craftsmen and artisans, and they were taking all the marbles all around the ancient temples and ancient buildings in Rome, and they were creating these beautiful floors. Look how beautiful they are with all the different stones. Not only the floor, but also the aisle columns are made of different materials. It's a great little jewel in Rome to understand medieval Rome. So to understand how Rome, medieval and Baroque Rome, because the fountain I showed you earlier is Baroque Rome, medieval and Baroque Rome are built with ancient Roman stones. You can call that looting or robbing. I will use more recycling and repurposing. That's what they were doing a lot in medieval. Churches. There's one church of the 300 historical churches that we have. So it's difficult for me to pick, but I love to go in a Sunday day at San Giorgio al Velabro. Off the beaten track, it's always empty, a beautiful church of the medieval times with one of the best examples of a medieval bell tower there. But then don't stop in front of the church. Look left, and you'll find a little arch that will seem, it's all fenced and a little bit with all the grass growing, so nobody really goes there. But then you will close up and you will find Arch of the Money Changers that was built in the year 204 AD under the rule of Septimius Severus, the first African emperor of Rome. And you will still see Septimius there with the veiled head and his wife, Julia Domna, attending to a sacrifice. This was a passage to the Roman Forum, and the money changers were working there in ancient Rome. And of course, they paid something for the emperor, saying also, Emperor, remember us when you have to tax us, of course. That was the idea. 1800 years old arch next to a beautiful church. And the Basilica of Santa Maria del Popolo, beautiful. From the outside, it's already beautiful, but then you step inside and you'll find two paintings of Caravaggio, another painting of Annibale Carracci, and then a fresco of Pinturicchio. Bernini's involved. Bramante works on the altarpiece. Cappella Chigi of Raphael the painter. One single church. And you step inside, you can spend years there to understand all the different chapels with so much of course. So keep in mind the Basilica di Santa Maria del Popolo a Piazza del Popolo. And then you still have some time, so you'll take a train and go to Ostia Antica, the harbor of ancient Rome, and you will enjoy so much going through the ancient ruins and the mosaics. Pompeii is famous because a volcano, of course, erupted. It's all under the ashes. But also we have our small Pompeii next to Rome, Ostia. It's not so far. I said you can go with the train, with the driver, and you will visit this incredible archaeological area that is off the beaten track. It means it's always empty. There are a lot of school trips there because the children go there to learn a lot. And you will visit mosaics, you'll see the ruins, you will understand the bakeries, the daily life of ancient Rome. We said about the Colosseum, the temples, the arches, but the people were living also. That means they needed to bake their bread. They needed the latrine. They needed their toilets. That's also important for a city of 1 million of inhabitants. To understand that, Ostia Antica, 30 minutes out of Rome, is a great half day or one full day outside of Rome. Also enjoying a little of green and vegetation. But let's finish with some off the beaten tracks museums, one of my favorite off the beaten tracks museums. Why not go to the B-Line metro station of Garbatella and enjoy the neighborhood? But then you will find this museum, Centrale Montemartini. Well, the museum, it's the artifacts and the sculptures are here displayed in a former factory. It was a power plant that worked until the 1960s, and then it was abandoned. Until the 1990s, they decided to restore all of it. So you will enjoy and visit the beautiful museum because it has high quality sculptures passing through diesel engines of the 1930s, 1950s, with a little bit of the smell, of course, still of the fresh paint to keep them in a good shape. But this, in my humble opinion, is a great way to put together modern and ancient times. This is the power plant until the 1960s, and that's how you will find it today. So you'll find marble statues inside a former thermoelectric power plant. And then a little jewel in Rome, the Museo Barracco. Giovanni Barracco was a collector of the late 1800s and a senator of the newborn country of Italy. And when he died, he donated all his collection to the city of Rome. So you will find this museum next to Campo de' Fiori. It's always empty, it's always free. Nobody wants to go there, but you'll step inside and you will find a great collection. By the way, also the museum, it's housed inside a 1500 palazzo that is really a masterpiece of the Renaissance times in Rome, but the collection displays heads of sculptures like this beautiful Apollo, the 2nd century AD, of this athlete that's crowning himself, and Egyptian art, because a collector really chooses and picks the best. So you will travel in time from ancient Egypt to medieval Rome, passing through the Mesopotamians area, passing through the Syrians and the Babylonians. So there's so much in that tiny collection, a little jewel. And recently opened museum, 2021, the Mausoleum in Feo. They were building, and then they found something underneath the surface. What a surprise in Rome. But then they decided to keep it. So they opened this new museum called the Mausoleum in Feo that is really, really well displayed and is well made, of course. And just to give you a little taste of this museum, look how beautiful are these marble decorations of a capital, that little flower made of ancient yellow marble from Tunisia. So you will enjoy really the great beauty of the marble decoration of ancient Rome. And we finish in this way. I was not able to take a little bit of breath because, of course, there's so much to say. But last but not least, don't forget, of course, the culinary culture. I cannot skip that. That's a must-see. Coffee shops, trattorie, osterie, bakeries, gelaterie, enoteche, pizzerie, pizza al taglio, alimentari, and pasticcerie. So all this is getting lost in the city and stopping to a coffee shop, to a bakery, and just tasting everything that you like. Because history, culture, archaeology, art, all goes with also the culinary culture. To understand fully a culture in a city, you need, of course, also to taste history, but also to taste all this great, let's say, food and drinks, so the delicatessen. And for instance, you will sit down in this restaurant called Pancrazio, you will turn around in the restaurant and you will find a 55 before Christ wall of ancient Rome that belongs to the theater of Pompeii. Well, the theater of Pompeii is where Julius Caesar was stabbed to death, the Ides of March, 44 BC. Well, in a restaurant, in some restaurants, there are still these remains, these ruins, and that's where you can eat. So that's why you need to understand the culinary culture, because also the restaurants can lead us to something that is so interesting, like the theater of Pompeii. Vatican, Trevi Fountain, how much I left out. Piazza Navona, San Clemente, Villa Borghese. Of course, I could not cover all of it, so there's still so much, but I try to give you a little taste of Rome and how I approach this incredible and endless city. So thank you, grazie, Efkaristo. We hope to see you soon online, or why not here in Rome. Thank you. Take care.